Hi, this is Kathy Quinn with Floriani. I want to thank you for coming to this month's construction portion of our project in the month. And it's our baby bib, and we're calling it Fun in the Sun. We're going to learn some new products this month. We're going to use our Press and Bond as a moisture barrier. That idea came from Trudy Patterson, one of our educators, and it works beautifully. And since you're pressing it there, it holds nice. It is a glue, a total piece of glue, so it's really nice when everything goes together that it will not allow that moisture to leak through to the back. Also, we're going to use our new Perfect Stick fleece, which is tacky on both sides. It's absolutely fantastic. It will not stick to itself, but it sticks beautifully to fabrics and stuff so that it doesn't slip and move when you're trying to stitch it together, which is absolutely wonderful. And the other product we're going to use today that's new to y'all is we are going to use our new Applique Wonder 1/2 inch tape. Now, for those of you that don't like putting binding on things, you resort to other tactics such as sewing it, flipping it, putting a decorative edging on it, anything to avoid putting binding on, even if you own a binder. Sometimes binding is a challenge because it's not something we practice all the time. So we're going to learn a new binding method that I found absolutely a ball. I also used Simplicity's new bias binder maker. It was wonderful. You just feed your strip through, it folds it and presses it and comes out the other end like magic. I know a lot of your dealers are carrying those. They also have 5 or 6 available tips to change the width of your binding. So it's really a cool machine. It's something, if you're considering binding stuff, you might want to look into, or that you use bias binding for stuff. Now, in this project, we're going to go ahead and move along. The first thing, of course, I always ask you to do is press and starch your fabric. This is so important. It helps your fabric from getting off grain. It helps it to stitch nice and clean. It's always a great idea. If you can possibly starch it, starch it. Now, the next thing I want you to do is we're going to use our Floriani no-show mesh. It doesn't matter if you're using white or beige. I want you to fuse this to the back of your front piece. Now remember, we've cut our front piece 12 inches by 12 inches, and we are going to trim it down to 11 by 11 after we have done our embroidery. That will account if it pulls in just a little bit. We're going to take 2 pieces of our Floriani fusible mesh, and I want you to look at the mesh. It is an embossed product. It means it's got little square looking things pressed into it. So I want you to put that mesh at a 45-degree angle to each other. We're bisecting that angle. So corner to corner is that 45 degree. And if you iron the mesh on this way, it's very, very strong. If you just make it a 90-degree angle or fuse it on the same, it really doesn't have the same strength. So we are going to fuse it that way. I want this bib to feel soft inside, the whole bib. So we're going to use this product. Now let's go ahead. The first thing we're going to do is mark our bib front up 4.5 inches from the bottom. That will be the top of our pocket placement line. Then you're going to measure up 3.5 inches from this line to start doing your center point. Then of course you're going to mark your vertical line straight down the middle, so of course 6 inches in. And that will give you the center of your design placement. You know, and if you notice, I use the Sew Line fabric marker. This is absolutely a fabulous marking pen. You can then use its eraser to erase these marks. There's no wax in this. It's not chalky. I don't know what they use, but it's magic. It never leaves a trace on your fabrics. And of course, it'll wash out as well. So this is a great choice. They come with let's say it's black lead, like this one I think has dark gray, and it also has an extra package of leads. But you can buy lead in every color. You can buy pink and white and yellow and green and blue. So you can pretty much mark anything with this, buying one pen and getting its refills. Okay, let's move on. Now we are going to create a pattern. We're going to cut a 4-inch circle out of medium cutaway. Now the reason I use medium cutaway, you can use anything you like, is I know that this pattern will hold up forever. You can press it, you can fold it, stuff it in a Ziploc, press it again, and it will hold. I try and trace all of my patterns. When I have to trace, I always trace it on medium or heavy cutaway, depending on how much I'm going to use it. And that way I know that that pattern is good forever, because since it's stabilizer, you can pin through it 100 times. It never starts to tear. You don't have to start patching or end up retracing your patterns. Now I created a 4-inch circle. We're going to use that to round the corners of our bib, as well as at the top I'm going to fold it in half and center it and mark my neckline. Now we aren't going to do this until after we have embroidered the bib, and then we're going to trim it down to its 11 by 11, and at that time we'll mark all of our corners and cut them. Now place your bib front to the wrong side of your bib front, so wrong side of the fabric, to our Floriani Perfect Stick fleece. Then I'm going to place a piece of Floriani Medium Tearaway on the back of the fleece. It's going to stick to the fleece, so I don't need a fusible stabilizer. And it pulls away beautifully because the fleece will allow it to release. It's fabulous. Now I want you to go ahead and hoop this, and we're going to go to our machines, center our needle, and we are going to place our water-soluble topping on top, and then we are going to go ahead and stitch it out. Remove your tearaway stabilizer from the back, pull away your topper just like we always do, and then I want you to take your bib back, and it's going to take 2 sheets of your press-and bond. Now you're going to line up the first sheet, iron it on. It's not going to cover the whole bib's back, because remember, our bib's 11 by 11. This is 11.5 by 8, so we're 3 inches short of one side. But that's fine, because I like the fact that it is doubled in the front of the bib, you know, right in the center where the most liquid ends up. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to press this on, peel the paper off the back, lay your second piece on top. Being careful, if you have a Teflon press sheet, I recommend it. That way you won't accidentally get your iron onto the press and bond that is uncovered. Put your second piece down and fuse that down as well. This is going to make our bib waterproof, and this part will be against the baby's chest so it keeps that moisture from going through. Now we've gone ahead and we have fixed our back. Our front has been embroidered. Now we're going to go ahead and trim our corners using our 4-inch circle. We're also going to fold that in half and mark and trim our neckline. Now I don't round the bottom corners until I actually line the pocket up, because I found I did it backwards. That's why the pictures are backwards. I trimmed the corners, then I had to trim the pocket to match the corners. So don't make my mistake. That's how we learn. Now I'm going to create my bias binding. I went ahead and I made 3/4 inch bias binding. I cut it at 1.5 inches, and what I did is I sent it through my bias binder, and you notice it's just spitting it out, a perfect 3/4 inch binding. All I did was cut the strip, wrap it on the spool, and feed it through this, and it actually presses it and makes it perfect. And it did it in seconds. It was wonderful. Now you notice my bias binding. What I did is I took my Applique Wonder 1/2 inch tape. Now I did cut this down the middle because I didn't want a really wide binding, so I cut this down the middle, and I ironed it on to either side of my bias binding. I've ironed it in place, and then I'm going to, once it's all on, I'm going to pull that protective paper off. And as you notice, the first thing we're going to bind is the top of the bib pocket. Now I want you to stick it to the back, lay your pocket sticking it to the one side of that bias binding, then fold the top edge over and stick it down, because this side of the applique wonder is tacky. The other side had a fusible, so we fused it down. Now this side's nice and sticky. So it sticks very nicely. We can reposition it if we need to. Once I've got it in place, I am going to press it, and that makes it permanent. Once I've got that, it's going to keep my bias from moving at all when I go to my machine and stitch this down. So the next step is to stitch the bias binding along the top of your pocket piece. Now I used an edge stitch foot. Every machine has some kind of edge stitch foot. That way I can run the edge along the bias binding, move my needle position over so it stitches it equally along the edge, and it always looks perfect. You can put it 1 or 2 needle widths away and it looks so professional because your line never wavers. Once we've done that, I'm going to place that on the pocket, and the first thing I did was I started the bias and I did it around the outside, leaving the neck edge. So once we have stuck our binding all the way around, then I came back and I put the neck edge on. Now this is personal preference. You could go ahead and stitch the edge binding down now and then come back and put the neck edge on. But I just stayed at the ironing board, put all of my bias tape on, sticking the back on first, folding it over to the front. Once that was done, I pressed it all so it held very well. Then I stitched from the shoulder seam out all around the bib, and I finished up doing the neck edge. Now I did leave tails on this bias that goes around the neck. I left 10 inches on mine. You have enough bias tape to leave 10 inches on each side to tie it around their little neck. So measure down 10 inches, stick it to your bib neckline, press it down, and leave the other one 10 inches. Then press that all together. So after you stitch the outside, you're going to come back and you are going to stitch from one end of that bias all along the edge to the other end, making sure that you turn your ends inside. You can press them inside. I folded mine under twice and zigzagged the ends, so I would make sure that that did not fray or come loose. So now we have created a wonderful bib. Now this will be a wonderful bib. I've washed mine. It washes beautifully. It stayed waterproof. It's really nice. And that perfect stick fleece was fabulous. Your bias binding was easy. So I hope you enjoyed this month's project. I sure enjoyed creating it for you. I look forward to seeing you next month. We're going to look at another new product, which is our new heat and shrink. And it's a wonderful product. Have a wonderful month. Bye-bye.